How's it going, trainers? Our last GBL Cup of the season is almost upon us. The Willpower Cup is a brand new Great League variant that will see specific Pokemon dominate. What are some of these Pokemon, you may ask? Well, join us as we break down some of the highlights for this cup, as well as a few teams to try out. Welcome back, trainers. So the Willpower Cup will be our next GBL Special Cup, taking over for the Ultra Halloween Cup on November 3rd. What makes this particular cup unique is that it'll only allow Psychic, Dark, and Fighting type Pokemon, as well as completely banning Gardevoir. And that makes sense, given that the Psychic Fairy would be able to charm down enemy Fighting and Dark types really easily. Now, even though this powerful Pokemon can't participate, there's still plenty of key contenders that'll have a lot of play in this cup, so let's start things off with some ferocious Fighting types. Up first, we have Medicham, who's also a Psychic type. It's no secret that this bulky Pokemon is prominent in the Open Great League, so its performance in this cup will be no different. Being Psychic and Fighting means it can take on Dark and Fighting types pretty well, though it will definitely struggle against other Psychics. Nonetheless, it can be a pretty good safe swap in this meta, and definitely worth building if you have the resources. Next up, we have Lucario, whose Steel subtyping will help it thrive in this cup. As you know, it already resists Dark attacks, but being part Steel actually makes Psychic neutral, instead of inflicting super effective damage. As if that wasn't enough, Shadow Ball gives it additional coverage against those Psychic types, so it can be a very good offensive pick. Now, despite its strong typing, Lucario is still a frailer Pokemon, so you do need to be careful with how you use it. It's definitely a Pokemon that you may need to save shields for if you decide to run it. And the last fighter we'll be discussing is Gallade. Now, remember how we said Gardevoir was banned from this cup? Well, its counterpart Gallade isn't, and it also has access to the devastating Charm attack. Now, obviously, Gallade won't be as good as Gardevoir since it lacks the Fairy typing. It won't have the impressive resistances of Gardevoir, nor will it get Stab on Charm. Though despite this shortcoming, it's still going to have the power to take down or scare away other Dark and Fighting types. Plus, it has the cheaper charged moves of Leaf Blade and Close Combat, which are great when utilizing its low charging Charm. Now, moving on to Psychic types, we have another Pokemon with a Fairy move, only this time, we have one who actually is a Fairy type. Galarian Rapidash saw a lot of prominence in the Psychic Cup, and it'll do well here too. With its fast-charging Fairy Wind, it'll allow it to unleash Body Spam and Play Rough, which will definitely make it a powerful pick for this cup. Though despite its strengths, Poison types will give it a hard time, which we'll talk about soon enough. Another Psychic star who will thrive in this Willpower meta is Victini, a mythical who can spam its signature move V-Create. It will see some competition from Dark types of the cup, so I would suggest having a good safe swap alongside it, especially after firing off one or two V-Creates. But outside of those Pokemon, it does remarkably well. For the last Psychic we want to highlight for this cup, we have the incredibly bulky Wobbuffet. Now admittedly, this is a rather expensive investment, needing to be both perfect and level 50 just to hit 1160 combat power. But even that low, it's still super bulky and has two fantastic fast moves, being Counter and Charm. I'd say it works better with Counter so you can more reliably charge up to Return, but Charm is still a viable option as well. And yes, I did say Return. Wobbuffet needs to be purified so it can get Return if you ever want to use it in PvP, and that includes this cup. Now onto our last Willpower type, we have Dark Pokemon. Mandibuzz is another bulky Pokemon who you've likely seen in PvP before. Here, it can really excel with its Dark typing being great against Psychic, and its flying moves being able to handle Fighting types. As for moves, you'll want to run it with Air Slash so you can have more consistent fast move pressure. Mandibuzz is in such a good place with its moves, typing, and stats that it really may be one of the best Pokemon in the cup. Still though, it's got a decent amount of weaknesses, with the Dark Poison types, Fairies, and Wobbuffet taking it down with ease. And speaking of Dark Poison types, that typing is excellent for this cup. It'll resist both Psychic and Dark, and it'll only take neutral damage from fighting. Hisuian Quillfish, Overquill, Skuntank, Alolan Grimer, and Alolan Muck are all great poison jabbers for this cup. With the lack of many Steel, Ground, or Ghost types, Poison Jab will chip down most of the meta, and Drapion works well as a spammier force with Poison Sting. Any of these can be fantastic picks for your team, and you'll definitely see a couple in one of our sample teams. Now before we get on to those teams, one more dark type I'd like to mention is Pawneared. Yes, not Bisharp, but it's pre-evolution. Pawneared holds a much more useful moveset for this cup with the faster energy charging Fury Cutter alongside the spammy Night Slash and Iron Head for coverage. While it is toast against most fighting types, Pawneared is excellent for taking down fairies like Galarian Rapidash and the various poison dark types we just talked about. Now while you can go for a higher bulk Pawneared, that'll require it to be level 50 or at least close to it. Truthfully, I would go for a lucky one that's closer to perfect, so it would really only need to be around level 43 or so to use. Now as always, these are just some of our picks for this cup. There's plenty of other Pokemon I didn't mention that you can find success with, some of which I'll be mentioning in our sample teams. So moving on, let's look at our first team to try out, and that's Galarian Rapidash, Sableye, and Lucario. This team gives you a Psychic, Dark, and Fighting type to utilize, but each also comes with a very useful subtyping. When Galarian Rapidash fails against Dark Poison types, both Lucario and Sableye can be great. I would watch out against the rare Great League Sneasler and Charm Gallade though, as they can put a lot of pressure on the whole team. For team number 2, we have Mandibuzz, Hisuian Quillfish, and Skuntank. This team is somewhat of a spin on the tried and true Poison Double Dark team that has proved successful in the Open Great League, only this time, it's a Dark Double Poison team, although all three do hold the Dark typing. Mandibuzz is a strong, bulky lead, but for fighting and fairies who threaten it, Quillfish and Skuntank are there to poison jab them right back. Now, those with fairy attacks are still a big threat to this team, so you'll need to focus your efforts on defeating any Gallade or Rapidash you come across. The quicker they're out of the way, the better. Steel types can also be a big threat to this team, but Skuntank's Flamethrower can be a strong counter to those. And for our last team, we have Victini followed by Scrafty and Gallade. Victini as your lead will give you the opportunity to put pressure on the opponent's shields or deal massive damage, while Scrafty and Gallade will do well at covering its dark weakness. You do want to be wary of when you use V-Create though, as it'll leave you with frail defenses and force you to either faint or switch out. This team can also work with Cresselia as a lead, with you sacrificing firepower for much better bulk. And if you really want, you can try Wobbuffet in place of Gallade for even more bulk. But still, this team has a lot of utility with high power and great coverage. But that just about wraps up this GBL prep guide. An interesting cup for sure, and I'm very curious to see how this meta carves itself out this week. Let me know who you'll be trying out in this cup in the comments below. And if you like this guide, be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. We'll have other analyses on the way, including a high horsepower Ursaluna breakdown for November Com Day. And you can bet we'll be breaking down any new cups in the next season of GBL. Until next time though, thank you all so much for watching, and I wish you all the best of luck in the Willpower Cup. Take care.